The great hall of Silverfang Keep gleamed under a full moon that poured silver light through tall arched windows. Crystal chandeliers swayed gently above the assembled nobles and warriors, their flames flickering like distant stars. The air carried the scent of pine resin from the great hearth and the faint metallic tang of polished armor. Every eye in the room fixed on the raised dais where Alpha King Darius stood tall and unyielding, his broad shoulders draped in the black and silver cloak of his house. His jaw was set, his golden eyes hard as the mountain stone that formed the palace walls. Elara Voss stood alone before him on the cold marble floor. Her simple white gown, the one she had worn for the mate bond ceremony years earlier, brushed the tops of her bare feet. The faint silver ribbon that marked their fated connection still circled her left wrist. A thin band of moonlight silk that now felt heavier than iron. She kept her chin lifted, her hazel eyes steady, though inside her chest her heart hammered like a war drum. She had known this moment was coming. She had felt it in the way Darius had grown distant these past months, in the whispers that followed her through the corridors, in the way the high priestess watched her with that small, satisfied smile. Darius's voice rang out, deep and commanding, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Tonight we gather not for celebration, but for clarity. The moon goddess has bound me to Elara Voss by the ancient rites. Yet a king cannot rule with weakness at his side. Silverfang stands on the edge of war with the Shadowveil rogues. Our borders tremble under threats we have never faced before. Aluna must be strong, fierce, able to command respect from every pack. Elara has served the court with quiet hands. She has tended the wounded and kept the hearths warm. But quiet hands cannot wield the power this kingdom demands. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nobles nodded in agreement, their jeweled rings catching the moonlight. Warriors shifted in their armor, eyes flicking between their king and the small woman before him. Elara felt every stare like a blade against her skin. She had spent 5 years at Darius's side, healing his soldiers after raids, calming his beast when the full moon pulled too hard, listening to his late-night confessions of doubt when no one else was near. In the quiet hours he had once called her his peace. Now those same hours were erased by a single public declaration. The high priestess, Lady Vespera, stood to Darius's right in robes of deep indigo embroidered with silver moons. Her silver hair was braided tight against her scalp, and her pale lips curved in the faintest smile as she watched Elara. No one else seemed to notice the way her fingers tightened around the crystal staff she carried. Elara noticed. Darius continued, his voice growing louder. I will not chain my kingdom to frailty. The mate bond, though sacred, is not above the needs of the realm. Therefore I, Alpha King Darius of Silverfang, publicly reject Elara Voss as my Luna. She is released from all claim. Let the goddess witness that I choose strength over sentiment. Gasps broke the silence. A few women in the back rows covered their mouths. One young guard, who had once thanked Elara for stitching his shoulder after a border skirmish, looked away in shame. Elara felt the words strike her like stones, but she did not flinch. She did not cry out. She did not fall to her knees as some in the court clearly expected. Instead, she reached up with steady fingers and untied the silver ribbon from her wrist. The silk slipped free and fluttered to the marble like a dying moth. For a heartbeat the air seemed to thicken, as if the moon itself held its breath. She looked straight into Darius's eyes. Her voice, when it came, was soft yet carried to every corner of the hall. I have never asked for the crown, my king. I have only asked to stand beside you as the goddess intended. If my presence weakens your throne, then I will not burden it any longer. Darius's jaw tightened. For the briefest moment something flickered behind his golden gaze, something almost like pain, but it vanished before it could take root. He gave a single sharp nod. So be it. The high priestess stepped forward, her voice smooth as oil. The goddess will bless this difficult choice, my king. A new Luna will be found, one worthy of Silverfang's glory. Her eyes met Elara's for a fraction of a second, and in that glance lay a satisfaction so sharp it felt like triumph. Elara turned away from the dais. The crowd parted for her, some with pity, others with scorn. She walked the long aisle between the rows of nobles without looking left or right. Her bare feet made no sound on the marble. Behind her she heard the low buzz of conversation begin again, the scrape of chairs, the clink of goblets as the court moved on to the next spectacle. No one followed her. No one offered a cloak against the night chill. She had become invisible the moment Darius spoke the words. The heavy oak doors of the great hall swung open at her approach. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Elara stepped onto the wide stone terrace that overlooked the kingdom. Torches lined the path down to the outer gates, their flames dancing in the wind. Beyond the walls the dark forest waited, ancient and whispering. She paused only once at the top of the steps, letting the moonlight wash over her face. The silver mark on her wrist, where the ribbon had been, tingled faintly, as if something deep inside her stirred in protest. She descended the steps with measured grace. The guards at the gate watched her pass but said nothing. The iron gates groaned open just enough for one small figure to slip through. Behind her they clanged shut with finality. Elara kept walking along the moonlit road that led away from everything she had known. The palace lights grew smaller with each step. The howls of the royal wolves rose behind the walls, but they sounded different tonight, restless and uncertain. She did not look back. Yet as the road curved into the shadow of the ancient forest, a new sound joined the night. Far off, deeper than the palace wolves, came a low, resonant howl that seemed to vibrate through the trees themselves. It was not a call of the Silverfang pack. It carried the weight of something older, something that had been waiting. Elara's steps faltered for the first time. The faint silver mark on her wrist warmed again, brighter now, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She pressed her hand over it and kept walking, the forest swallowing her small form. Inside the great hall the feast continued. Darius remained on the dais, his face carved from stone. The high priestess leaned close to him and murmured something only he could hear. He nodded once, but his gaze drifted to the empty space where Elara had stood. The moon continued to shine through the windows, indifferent and eternal. And in the forest beyond the gates, the distant howling grew louder, as if the night itself knew that something ancient had already begun to stir. The forest swallowed Elara whole as she walked deeper into the ancient woods. The palace lights had long since disappeared behind the thick curtain of trees, leaving only the moon to guide her steps along the narrow dirt path. Each breath she took carried the sharp scent of pine and damp earth, and the distant call of night birds echoed like questions she could not answer. Her bare feet moved steadily despite the small stones that pressed into her skin. She refused to let the pain show. She had spent years learning how to carry wounds without letting the world see them break her. Memories rose unbidden as she walked, each one sharper than the last. She remembered the first time she had been brought to the Silverfang court as a young Omega, barely more than a girl. Her family name already faded into obscurity after a border raid had claimed her parents. The court had whispered that she was nothing special, just another soft-handed servant who would fade into the background. But Darius had seen her differently then. In the quiet hours after a brutal skirmish with northern raiders, she had knelt beside his wounded beta commander and pressed her palms to the torn flesh. The man's breathing had steadied under her touch, the bleeding slowing as if her presence alone calmed the chaos inside him. Darius had watched from the doorway, his golden eyes narrowed in surprise. Later that night, he had found her in the healing halls and spoken words she still carried like fragile glass. "You have a gentleness this kingdom has forgotten it needs," he had said, his voice low so no one else could hear. His hand had brushed her cheek, warm and careful, and for one brief moment she had believed she mattered. Those private moments had become her secret strength. She remembered the long winters when fever swept through the lower barracks. While the nobles feasted in the great hall, Elara had moved silently between cots. Brewing teas from dried herbs she gathered herself, wiping sweat from fevered brows, and whispering calm assurances until the sick wolves slept. Darius would appear at the edge of the room after the feasts ended, his cloak still smelling of wine and smoke. He would watch her without speaking at first, then pull her aside into the shadowed corridor and hold her close, his arms strong around her smaller frame. "Stay with me tonight," he would murmur against her hair. "The court does not need to know how much I lean on you." She had stayed every time, giving him the peace his crown denied him, never asking for more than those stolen hours. She had believed the mate bond would one day make those private truths public. She had believed she was building something lasting. Now those memories burned. The same man who had once sought her comfort had stood before the entire court and called her weakness incarnate. The same hands that had once cradled her face had signed her dismissal with a single nod. Elara felt a quiet anger coil low in her chest, not the loud kind that shouted or wept, but the steady kind that simply refused to beg. She had never demanded the crown. She had only wanted to stand beside him as the goddess had intended. Yet the court had laughed softly when he spoke, their eyes sliding over her as though she were already gone. Even the servants who had once thanked her for small kindnesses had looked away, afraid to show loyalty to a woman the king had just discarded. A faint warmth pulsed at her left wrist. Elara glanced down and saw the silver mark where the ribbon had been tied earlier that evening. It glowed softly now, a delicate tracery of light that traced the shape of a crescent moon across her skin. She paused beneath an ancient oak, pressing her fingers to the mark as if to quiet it. The glow brightened for a heartbeat, then dimmed again, leaving only a faint shimmer. She did not understand what it meant. She had always been told her wolf was quiet, almost absent, a gentle spirit better suited to healing than to battle. The court had mocked that too, an omega with no true bite. They had called her in the kitchens when they thought she could not hear. The king will tire of her softness soon enough. She had heard every word and kept serving anyway, because the kingdom needed steady hands more than sharp claws. She continued walking, the path narrowing as it wound deeper between the trees. The howls she had heard earlier had faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig under some unseen creature. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but she pushed it aside. She would not stop until she was far enough from Silverfang that no one could drag her back in chains of pity or obligation. The night air grew cooler, and a light mist began to rise from the ground, curling around her ankles like curious fingers. She drew her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. The same white gown she had worn for the ceremony, now stained at the hem with dirt and forest debris. It no longer mattered. The gown, like the ribbon, belonged to a life that had ended in the Great Hall. Another memory surfaced, this one from only 3 months earlier. Darius had returned from a long patrol along the eastern border, his beast restless and his body bruised from a clash with rogue scouts. The court had pressed him for reports and strategies, but he had slipped away at midnight and found her in the small garden she tended behind the healing halls. Under the same full moon that now watched her exile, he had pulled her into the shadows of the rose trellis and kissed her with a desperation that felt like need. "Do not leave me," he had whispered against her lips. "The crown is heavy, but you make it bearable." She had believed him then. She had let herself hope that one day he would stand before the court and claim her openly, not as a secret comfort, but as his chosen Luna. That hope now lay shattered on the marble floor of the throne room, ground to dust beneath the boots of nobles who had never truly seen her. The silver mark on her wrist pulsed again, warmer this time, sending a soft ripple of energy up her arm. Elara stopped and stared at it, brow furrowed. The light seemed to respond to her thoughts, growing brighter when she remembered Darius's private tenderness and dimming when the public rejection replayed in her mind. She shook her head, refusing to chase mysteries when her heart was still raw. The mark was probably nothing more than leftover magic from the broken bond, a final echo of something that had never been allowed to bloom fully. She kept moving. The path began to slope downward, leading toward a small ravine where a stream murmured in the distance. Her steps grew heavier, not from the terrain, but from the weight of everything she had carried in silence for years. She had comforted servants whose families had been lost to the same wars Darius fought. She had sat with frightened children in the lower village when the howls of battle wolves grew too loud, telling them stories of the moon goddess's mercy until they slept. She had even stood between two arguing alphas once, her quiet voice steadying them long enough for Darius to arrive and deliver justice. No one had ever thanked her publicly. No one had ever acknowledged that the kingdom ran smoother because an unseen Omega refused to let it fall apart. A low rustle ahead made her lift her head. The mist thickened, and through the trees she caught the first flicker of orange light. Torches, several of them, bobbing along the path where it narrowed between two rocky outcrops. Voices carried on the wind, rough and laughing, the kind that belonged to men who had no fear of the night or the laws of any king. Bandits. She had heard tales of them preying on travelers foolish enough to leave the safety of the packs after dark. Elara's heart quickened, but she did not run. There was nowhere to run. The forest pressed close on both sides, and the ravine dropped sharply to her left. The torchlight grew brighter, revealing at least 6 figures blocking the path ahead, their silhouettes armed with blades that caught the firelight. She stopped 20 paces away, hands loose at her sides, chin still lifted with the same quiet dignity she had shown in the throne room. The lead bandit, a broad-shouldered man with a scarred jaw, raised his torch higher and grinned. Well, well, looks like the moon goddess delivered a gift tonight. Traveling alone. Little one, the roads aren't kind to pretty things without escort. The others chuckled, spreading out to cut off any chance of retreat. Elara felt the silver mark on her wrist flare hot for a third time, but she kept her gaze steady on the man in front. She would not scream. She would not beg. Whatever came next, she would face it the same way she had faced the rejection, with the silent strength the court had mistaken for weakness. The bandits took another step closer, their torches casting long, dancing shadows across the forest floor. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what fate had prepared for the woman the Alpha King had cast aside. Inside the great hall the feast continued as though nothing had changed. Goblets clinked, laughter rose in careful waves, and the musicians struck up a measured tune that masked the undercurrent of tension. Yet Alpha King Darius sat on the dais with his shoulders rigid, his golden eyes fixed on the heavy oak doors that had closed behind Elara. The empty space where she had stood still seemed to echo with her quiet words. He had expected tears or pleas. He had prepared himself for the sight of her breaking. Instead, she had simply removed the silver ribbon, spoken with calm dignity, and walked away as if the entire court were no longer worthy of her attention. The thought unsettled him more than he cared to admit. A servant refilled his goblet with dark wine, but Darius waved it away. The high priestess, Lady Vespera, leaned closer from her seat to his right. Her indigo robes brushed his arm, and her voice was low enough that only he could hear. You have done what the kingdom required. My king, the goddess herself will honor such strength. Elara Voss was a gentle soul, but gentleness has no place when Shadowveil sharpens its blades at our borders. The nobles already whisper their approval. A stronger match will be found soon, one whose bloodline carries the fire this throne demands. Darius nodded once, but the motion felt heavy. He remembered the way Elara's hands had steadied his beta commander after the last raid, how the man's ragged breathing had smoothed beneath her touch. He remembered nights when the weight of command pressed too hard, and she had simply sat beside him in silence until the storm inside him quieted. Those moments had felt like peace. Now they felt like something he had carelessly discarded. He pushed the thought down, telling himself it was only the wine and the late hour playing tricks on his mind. The doors to the hall opened again, admitting a group of senior nobles led by Lord Harlan, an older alpha whose lands bordered the eastern passes. Their faces were flushed with drink and satisfaction. Lord Harlan bowed low, then straightened with the confidence of a man who believed his counsel had just been proven right. "My king, the court breathes easier tonight. We have long feared the mate bond would tie you to weakness. Your decision was wise. My own daughter carries the blood of 3 strong alphas. She would bring alliances that could crush the rogues before they even crossed the river. The council stands ready to draft the formal betrothal if you give the word." Other nobles murmured agreement, their eyes bright with the promise of new power. One of them, a sharp-faced baroness whose family controlled the grain stores, added smoothly, "The old prophecy speaks clearly. A luna of fire and iron will shield Silverfang. Soft hands may heal wounds, but only a warrior's blood can prevent them." They spoke as though Elara had never existed, as though 5 years of quiet service could be erased by one public declaration. Darius felt a flicker of irritation rise, not at them, but at the ease with which they dismissed her. Still, he kept his face impassive. A king could not appear uncertain before his court. He rose from the throne, the black and silver cloak settling around him like armor. "The hour grows late. We will speak of alliances in the council chamber tomorrow. Tonight the kingdom celebrates its clarity." The words tasted dry on his tongue, but they served their purpose. The nobles bowed and stepped aside, satisfied for now. Darius strode from the dais and left the hall through the private corridor that led to the royal solar. The heavy door closed behind him with a solid thud, sealing out the noise of the feast. The solar was quiet, lit only by a low fire in the hearth and 2 oil lamps on the long oak table. Maps of the borders lay spread across the wood, marked with red ink where Shadowveil scouts had been sighted. Darius poured himself a measure of water instead of wine and stood at the window overlooking the dark forest. The same moon that had witnessed the rejection now hung high, silver and indifferent. He could not see the road Elara had taken, but he knew it wound through those trees like a scar. For the first time since the ceremony, he allowed himself to wonder what she felt walking alone into the night. The thought brought an unwelcome tightness to his chest. The door opened softly. Lady Vespera entered without knocking, carrying a small wooden chest bound in silver. She set it on the table and opened the lid, revealing ancient scrolls and crystal vials of moon-blessed ink. "I have brought the original texts of the prophecy. My king, you should read them again to strengthen your resolve. The goddess warned that a gentle bond would invite ruin. Elara's line has always been quiet, unremarkable. She could never have stood beside you when war comes." Darius turned from the window and approached the table. Vespera unrolled one of the scrolls with practiced care. The parchment was yellowed, the ink faded but still legible. He scanned the familiar words about strength and fire, about a Luna whose spirit would match the king's blade. Yet as his eyes moved across the text, something caught his attention near the bottom edge. A small footnote in a different hand, almost hidden by the decorative border, read, "And the sealed guardian shall awaken only when the false crown is cast aside." He reached to trace the words, but Vespera's hand moved swiftly, rolling the scroll closed again and tucking it back into the chest. "A minor annotation from a later scribe," she said smoothly, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Nothing that concerns us tonight. The main prophecy is clear. You have acted in the kingdom's best interest." She closed the chest lid with a quiet click and placed her palm on top of it, as though guarding its contents. Darius stared at the chest for a long moment. The phrase "sealed guardian" lingered in his mind like a half-remembered dream. But the pressure of the day and the weight of his decision crowded it out. He told himself it was only superstition, the ramblings of old priests trying to make sense of ancient fears. A sharp knock sounded at the door. One of the border sentries entered, still wearing his patrol cloak dusted with road dirt. The man bowed low, his face pale. "Forgive the intrusion. My king, I rode hard from the eastern watchtowers. The great shields that protect our frontier have begun to flicker. The light along the crystal pillars dims for seconds at a time. then returns. The captains have never seen it before. They fear it is a sign of weakening magic. Darius's hand tightened on the back of a chair. The border shields were ancient, woven into the land itself by the first Luna centuries ago. They had stood unbroken through wars and storms. A constant barrier that kept Shadowveil's forces at bay. Their failure now, on the very night he had rejected his fated mate, sent a cold thread of unease down his spine. He glanced once more at the chest Vespera still guarded, then dismissed the sentry with a curt nod. "Double the patrols. I will inspect the towers myself at first light." The man left, and silence fell again. Darius walked back to the window, staring out at the forest where Elara had vanished. The flicker of doubt he had felt earlier returned, sharper this time, like a blade turning slowly in his gut. He had believed his decision would strengthen the kingdom, yet the shields were already showing cracks. The high priestess watched him from across the table, her expression serene. But Darius could not shake the feeling that something important had slipped through his fingers tonight. Something the scrolls had tried to name before it was hidden away. Outside, the moon continued its slow arc across the sky. In the distance the forest remained dark and still, holding its secrets close. Darius did not know it yet, but the first threads of consequence had already begun to pull tight around the crown he wore so heavily. The lead bandit took another step forward, his scarred jaw splitting into a wider grin as torchlight danced across the blade in his hand. His companions fanned out, boots crunching on fallen leaves, their laughter low and ugly in the mist-filled air. Elara stood perfectly still, her white gown now streaked with dirt, and her bare feet rooted to the cold ground. Fear coiled tight in her stomach, but she refused to let it show in her eyes. She had faced the entire court of Silverfang without breaking. 6 armed men in a dark forest would not be the thing that made her beg. One of the bandits, thinner and quicker, circled to her left and reached out as if to grab her arm. Elara did not flinch. Instead, she lifted her left hand in a small, instinctive motion meant to ward him off. The silver mark on her wrist caught the torchlight and flared suddenly, brighter than before. The man jerked back as though burned, his eyes widening in confusion. "What in the goddess's name?" he muttered, rubbing his fingers. The others paused, their laughter dying. At that exact moment a soft rustle came from the underbrush to Elara's right. A young forest doe, no more than a year old, burst into the open path. Its eyes rolled white with terror, flanks heaving from some unseen predator deeper in the woods. The creature skidded to a halt between Elara and the bandits, legs trembling so violently it could barely stand. Normally such an animal would bolt at the first sign of humans, yet it did not run. Instead it pressed close to Elara's side, its warm muzzle brushing the hem of her gown as though seeking shelter. Without thinking, Elara lowered her hand and rested her palm gently on the doe's neck. The silver mark pulsed again, warm and steady now, sending a faint ripple through her fingers and into the frightened animal. The doe's breathing slowed almost at once. Its ears twitched once, then relaxed. The trembling in its legs eased until it stood calm beside her, as though the two of them had known each other for years. Elara felt a strange spark ignite low in her chest, a quiet recognition she could not name. She had always been able to soothe the sick and the wounded back at the palace, but never like this. Never with something so immediate, so alive. The bandits shifted uneasily. The leader spat on the ground. "Enough games. Grab her. The rogues pay good coin for pretty captives." He lunged forward, but the moment his shadow fell across the doe, the animal lifted its head and stamped one delicate hoof. A low, protective sound rumbled in its throat, something no ordinary deer should have made. The man froze mid-step. His companions exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered, "Look at her wrist, that light. It ain't right." Moonlight filtered stronger through a break in the canopy overhead, as if the moon itself had turned its full attention to the small clearing. The silver beams touched Elara's skin and seemed to cling there. The mark on her wrist brightened until it cast a soft glow across her palm and up her arm. The light was not harsh. It felt like cool water and warm hearth at once. Elara stared at it, heart pounding, fear now tangled with something sharper, something that felt almost like awakening. Welcome back to the Alpha King Rain channel. Today I'm bringing you a brand new and incredibly captivating story that will surely enthrall you if you listen to the whole video. The story is entirely fictional. The video is created using AI, and it's designed to provide value, entertainment, and positive education for viewers aged 13 and up. Now, let's dive into today's story. For the first time since the rejection, she did not feel small. She felt seen, not by the court, not by Darius, but by something older than both. A whisper brushed across her mind, so faint it might have been the wind through the leaves. Yet the words were clear, spoken in a voice that carried the weight of centuries. Sealed no longer, daughter of the first light. Rise and remember. The voice faded as quickly as it had come, leaving only the echo of power humming beneath her skin. Elara's breath caught. She had never heard voices in the forest before. She had never felt her blood answer to the moon like this. The doe leaned harder against her leg, as though confirming what she had just heard. The bandits began to back away. The leader's torch wavered in his grip. "This one's marked," he growled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Witch or cursed, I don't care. We ain't touching moon-touched blood tonight." The others nodded quickly, their eyes darting between Elara and the calm doe that now stood like a guardian at her side. They retreated step by step, torches bobbing, until the forest swallowed their light completely. The clearing fell quiet once more, save for the soft sigh of the wind and the steady breathing of the young deer. Elara remained motionless, hands still resting on the doe's neck. The silver mark slowly dimmed until it was only a faint tracery again, yet the warmth stayed inside her chest. She had spent years being called weak, being told her gentleness was a flaw. Now, in the middle of nowhere, with danger melting away at a single touch, the first fragile spark of self-recognition flickered to life. Maybe the court had been wrong. Maybe there was more inside her than anyone, including Darius, had ever bothered to see. The doe nuzzled her hand once in quiet thanks, then turned and vanished back into the underbrush with graceful leaps. Elara watched it go, a small, uncertain smile touching her lips for the first time since the Great Hall. She drew a steadying breath and continued along the path, the mist swirling around her ankles like a companion now rather than a threat. Then the sound came, distant at first but growing rapidly, the heavy thunder of hooves pounding against the forest floor. Not the scattered steps of a small group, but one powerful rider moving fast. The ground vibrated beneath her feet. Elara turned toward the sound, heart leaping back into her throat. The trees ahead parted slightly where the path curved, and through the moonlight, she saw the silhouette of a lone horseman emerge from the deeper shadows. Black armor gleamed under the moon, the cloak streaming behind him like midnight wings. The horse was massive, dark as the night itself, its breath pluming white in the cool air. The rider reined in sharply a dozen paces away, the great beast skidding to a halt without a single whinny of protest. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The man's face was hidden behind a half-raised visor, but Elara could feel the weight of his gaze studying her, taking in the white gown, the dirt on her feet, the faint silver glow that still lingered on her wrist. He did not draw a weapon. He did not speak a threat. Instead, he swung down from the saddle with fluid grace and stood before her, tall and broad-shouldered, the black armor etched with unfamiliar runes that caught the moonlight like distant stars. Elara lifted her chin, the same quiet dignity she had shown the court now facing this stranger in the forest. The night held its breath again, waiting to see what fate had sent riding out of the darkness toward the woman the Alpha King had cast aside. Back within the stone walls of Silverfang Keep, the night had grown deeper, yet the palace refused to sleep. Torches burned low along the corridors, and servants moved like shadows carrying trays of half-eaten food and empty wine jugs from the feast. Alpha King Darius had retired to his private chambers, but sleep would not come. He paced the thick rugs before the hearth, his mind turning over the sentry's report about the flickering border shields. The fire cast long, restless shapes across the walls, and the air felt heavier than it should on a summer night. Lady Vespera had not left his side. She followed him now with quiet steps, her indigo robes whispering against the stone. In one hand she carried a small vial of pale liquid that caught the firelight like captured moonlight. "The shields have never faltered before my king," she said, her voice smooth and reassuring. "This is no coincidence. The goddess warns us when the balance is disturbed. Elara's departure has already begun to unravel the old protections. We must act swiftly to restore strength before the rogues sense weakness." Darius stopped pacing and turned to face her. His golden eyes narrowed, but the doubt that had taken root earlier refused to die. She walked away without protest. He said more to himself than to the priestess. 5 years she served this court in silence, and the moment I spoke the words she simply left. No tears, no accusations, only that steady gaze as if she already knew something I did not. Vespera set the vial on the heavy oak table beside a stack of fresh scrolls. She uncorked it with deliberate care, and the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the room. "Gentle souls often hide their bitterness behind calm masks," she replied. "I have seen it many times in the temple. They smile while they curse you in their hearts. Tomorrow, I will send word to the border villages. We must plant the truth before rumors twist it. Elara Voss was never meant to stand beside you. Her blood carried the mark of frailty. The court already whispers it. We only need to give their whispers direction." She poured a single measured drop of the liquid into a crystal goblet and offered it to Darius. "Drink this, my king. It will steady your thoughts and silence the unnecessary questions." The goddess prepared this blend herself for moments when a ruler's heart wavers. "By morning you will see the path clearly again." Darius took the goblet, but did not drink. He stared into the liquid, watching tiny silver flecks swirl like distant stars. Something about the priestess's smile tonight felt too sharp, too pleased. He remembered the footnote on the scroll, the one she had hidden so quickly. "Sealed guardian." The words refused to leave him. Yet the pressure of the crown pressed down harder than any single doubt. The nobles expected decisive action. The warriors needed a king who did not hesitate. He lifted the goblet and drained it in one swallow. The liquid tasted cool and faintly sweet, sliding down his throat like a promise. Vespera's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, though she kept her expression serene. While Darius turned back to the window, she slipped from the chamber and moved through the dimly lit halls with purpose. 2 of her most trusted temple guards waited in a small alcove near the servants' quarters. They wore plain cloaks that hid their priestly markings. "The Omega is in the forest road heading north," she told them, her voice low and urgent. "Find her before dawn. Do not harm her yet. Simply watch and report every step she takes. If she speaks to anyone or shows any sign of power, you will return at once. And spread the word quietly in the lower villages. Elara Voss fled because she knew she was unworthy. She carries weakness that could invite the rogues across our borders. Let the people remember who truly protects them." The guards bowed and vanished into the night through a side gate. Vespera watched them go, her fingers tightening around the crystal staff she now carried openly. She had waited years for this night. The old murder she had concealed, the one that had silenced the true guardian bloodline long ago, must remain buried. Elara's quiet presence had always been a threat, even if the girl herself did not know why. Now that she was gone, the priestess could finally guide the kingdom toward the future she had planned, a future where the temple held the real power behind the throne. She turned toward the lower levels of the palace where the servants slept. One young maid named Mira had been particularly close to Elara. The girl had often carried messages and small comforts between the healing halls and the royal quarters. Vespera found her in the narrow room she shared with 2 others. Mira sat on the edge of her cot, still dressed in her day clothes, her eyes red from quiet crying. She looked up as the priestess entered, and fear flashed across her face. "My lady," Mira whispered, standing quickly. I was praying for the king's peace." Vespera closed the door behind her with a soft click. "You were close to Elara Voss, were you not? You saw things in the temple archives when you helped with the records last spring. Tell me what you read there, child. The old scrolls about the sealed bloodlines. It is important for the kingdom's safety." Myra's hands trembled at her sides. She had indeed glimpsed something weeks earlier, a faded entry about a guardian line thought lost, and a protective seal that would break only in exile. She had meant to tell Elara in the morning, but the rejection had happened first. Now the words stuck in her throat. "I saw nothing of importance, my lady," she said, her voice barely audible. "Only old stories. Nothing that matters now." Vespera stepped closer, her smile never wavering. "Loyalty is a fine thing, but misplaced loyalty can bring harm. The king needs truth, not secrets. Speak, and you will be rewarded. Stay silent, and the temple has ways of ensuring silence." Myra's eyes widened, but before she could answer, the priestess raised one hand. A faint pulse of temple magic shimmered in the air, and the girl's voice caught as if an invisible hand had closed gently around her throat. She clutched at her neck, gasping. Vespera leaned in and whispered one final instruction. "Sleep now, child. When you wake, you will remember only that Elara was weak, and the kingdom is safer without her. The goddess demands it." The maid slumped onto her cot unconscious before she could cry out. Vespera straightened her robes and left the room as quietly as she had entered. The kingdom was already beginning to forget the Omega who had once moved through its halls like a gentle shadow. By morning the rumors would spread like smoke, and the court would close ranks around the king. No one would question the priestess's guidance. Far beyond the palace walls, in the depths of the ancient forest, the thunder of hooves had stopped. The black-armored rider stood a dozen paces from Elara, his massive horse breathing steadily behind him. Moonlight glinted off the runes etched into his armor, and his half-raised visor revealed only the strong line of his jaw and the intense focus in his dark eyes. He made no threatening move. Instead, he reached out, one gloved hand palm up, in a clear offer of help rather than capture. The gesture was simple, yet carried the weight of something deliberate, as if this stranger in the night had been waiting for exactly this moment. Elara stared at the offered hand, her silver mark tingling faintly beneath her skin. The forest around them had grown strangely still, as though every creature held its breath to see what choice she would make. The black-armored rider stood motionless for a long moment, his gloved hand still extended toward her in the moonlight. Elara studied him carefully, her heart beating steadily despite the exhaustion that weighed on her limbs. His horse remained calm behind him, its dark coat gleaming like polished obsidian, and the runes etched into the man's armor seemed to shimmer faintly, as if responding to the same silver light that had touched her wrist earlier. He was taller than any warrior she had seen in Silverfang's court, broad-shouldered and built for the kind of battles fought far from polished marble halls. Yet there was no threat in his posture, no drawn blade, no mocking grin like the bandits who had fled only minutes before. Instead, he waited, patient and unhurried, as though he had ridden through the night specifically for this encounter. Slowly he raised his other hand and lifted the half-visor of his helm. The face revealed beneath was strong and weathered, with sharp cheekbones, a straight nose, and dark eyes that held the depth of shadowed forests. A faint scar traced along his left jaw, but it did not detract from the quiet authority that radiated from him. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and resonant, carrying the accent of the wild northern territories. "You have nothing to fear from me, Elara Voss. I am Ronan, King of Shadowveil. I have watched the borders of your former kingdom for many years, waiting for the night the Silverfang court would make its greatest mistake." Elara's breath caught at the name he used. Elara Voss. It was her own, of course, yet no one in the palace had ever spoken it with such simple respect. In Silverfang she had been called the king's quiet companion, the soft-handed Omega, or simply the girl, when the nobles wished to diminish her. Never had her full name been offered like a title of honor by a stranger who owed her nothing. She searched his face for deceit, but found only steady truth. The silver mark on her wrist warmed again, not in warning but in quiet recognition, as if some ancient part of her already knew this man was not an enemy. Ronan lowered his hand slightly but kept it open, palm up, a clear invitation rather than a command. The forest grows dangerous after midnight, especially for one who has just been cast out under moonlight. I offer you safe passage to Shadowveil. No chains, no price, no demand that you become anything other than what you already are. My riders patrol these roads to protect those the great packs discard. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. But something tells me you are different. The old magic in the air around you speaks of a guardian long sealed. I have seen the signs before in forgotten texts my own people guard. Elara felt a cautious spark of hope flicker inside her chest. After the public humiliation in the Great Hall, after the long walk through memories that cut deeper with every step, this stranger's words felt like cool water on burned skin. She had expected capture, or worse, from anyone who crossed her path tonight. Instead, this rogue king, feared across every border for his wild armies and unyielding independence, stood before her offering shelter without bargaining for her loyalty or her body or her secrets. The doe that had sheltered beside her earlier had trusted her touch. Now something deeper inside Elara urged her to trust this moment. She took one careful step forward, then another, until her fingers brushed his gloved palm. The contact sent a gentle pulse through her. Not the possessive heat she had once felt from Darius in stolen moments, but a steady warmth that spoke of alliance rather than ownership. Ronan's grip was firm yet gentle as he helped her mount the great horse behind the saddle. He swung up in front of her with effortless grace, settling her arms around his waist so she could hold on securely. The horse turned without a word of command, its hooves quiet on the forest path as they began to move deeper into the northern woods, away from Silverfang and toward the distant realm of Shadowveil. As they rode, Ronan spoke again, his voice low enough to carry only to her ears over the soft rhythm of the horse's gait. I have studied the movements of Silverfang for a long time. Your king is powerful in battle, but blind in matters of the heart and the old bloodlines. He cast you aside tonight because he believes strength must always roar. He does not yet understand that the quiet guardians have always been the true shield of these lands. You carry something ancient in your veins. Elara of the First Light. The name is not one they used in their polished halls, but it is the one whispered in the oldest scrolls my scribes still protect. The sealed line did not die out as they claim. It simply waited for the right moment to awaken. Elara rested her cheek lightly against the cool metal of his armor, listening. The title he gave her, Elara of the First Light, stirred something deep and unfamiliar, like a half-remembered dream from childhood stories her mother had told before the border raids took her parents. No one in Silverfang had ever spoken of her bloodline with anything but dismissal. Darius had called her gentle, useful in private, but unworthy in public. This rogue king spoke as though she mattered in a way that had nothing to do with crowns or thrones. Only with the quiet power she had begun to feel stirring since the ribbon had fallen from her wrist. The forest thinned gradually as they traveled. Ancient trees gave way to rolling hills bathed in moonlight, and the air carried the faint scent of salt from the distant sea that bordered Shadowveil. Elara felt the tension in her shoulders ease for the first time since the great hall doors had closed behind her. The despair that had wrapped around her like chains began to loosen, replaced by a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward that did not require her to beg or prove herself to those who had already judged her unworthy. Ronan did not press her for conversation. He simply rode with steady purpose, one hand on the reins and the other resting lightly on the hilt of his sword, guarding the road ahead without making her feel like a prize or a prisoner. Hours passed in quiet rhythm. The moon climbed higher, and Elara found herself watching the horizon behind them. As the path crested a low ridge, she turned her head and caught one final glimpse of Silverfang's distant lights. The palace towers still glowed faintly against the night sky. But even from this distance, she could see the way some of the outer lanterns flickered and dimmed, as though the kingdom itself had begun to lose its steady breath. A small ache bloomed in her chest, not for the man who had rejected her, but for the place that had once been home and the people she had quietly served for years. She wondered if Darius had already returned to his chambers, if the High Priestess was already whispering new plans, if the court had moved on as though she had never existed. Ronan must have felt the shift in her posture because he spoke softly without turning. The lights of old kingdoms often dim when they turn away what they most need. Shadowveil does not make that mistake. You will be safe there, Elara of the First Light, and in time, if the goddess wills it, you may discover that the power they feared in you was never weakness at all. The horse carried them onward into the deepening night. Elara kept her arms around the Rogue King, who had ridden out of the darkness to offer her a future no one in Silverfang had ever imagined. For the first time since the moonlit rejection, the path ahead did not feel like exile. It felt like the beginning of something vast and unknown, something that might one day force the entire realm to see the woman they had cast aside in a new and undeniable light. The journey through the northern hills stretched into the pale light of dawn, and then into the full days that followed. Ronan guided them along hidden paths known only to his people, avoiding the main trade roads where Silverfang spies might still roam. Elara rode behind him in silence at first, her arms wrapped around his armored waist, the steady rhythm of the horse lulling her exhausted body into a fragile rest. Each mile that carried her farther from Silverfang felt like another layer of the old life peeling away. The pain of Darius's public rejection still sat heavy in her chest, a dull ache that flared whenever she closed her eyes and saw the moonlit great hall again. Yet with every sunrise something new stirred inside her, a quiet curiosity about the man who had offered her safety without asking for anything in return. On the third morning they crossed the invisible border into Shadowveil. The land changed almost at once. Where Silverfang's forests had been ordered and watchful, these wild hills rolled freely under open skies, dotted with ancient standing stones that glowed faintly when the sun touched them. The air carried the crisp scent of salt from the nearby sea and the rich earth of untamed meadows. Villages appeared in the valleys, not clustered behind high walls, but spread openly with low stone houses and communal fires where people gathered without fear. Children ran alongside the horse as it passed, waving at Ronan with bright, unafraid smiles. Warriors in dark armor nodded respectfully from the ridges, but did not surround them like guards. Elara felt the difference in her bones. This was a kingdom that trusted its strength rather than hiding behind it. Ronan reined the horse to a stop at the crest of a final hill. Below them lay the heart of Shadowveil, a sprawling stronghold built into the cliffs overlooking the sea. Towers of black stone rose seamlessly from the rock face, banners of deep emerald and silver snapping in the wind. No grand marble halls or crystal chandeliers here. Instead, the keep felt alive, rooted in the land itself. "Welcome to your new home," Ronan said simply, his voice carrying no boast, only truth. "No one here will judge you by the crown you left behind. They will see you for what you choose to become." The first weeks passed in a gentle rhythm that surprised Elara. She was given a quiet chamber high in the eastern tower where the sea winds sang through open windows. Servants brought simple meals and warm clothes without ceremony. No one whispered behind her back or compared her to a stronger bloodline. Ronan introduced her to his council, not as a refugee, but as a guest of honor. He asked her name and listened when she spoke of the healing arts she had practiced in Silverfang. Within days she found herself in the infirmary tents near the training fields, tending to warriors who had returned from border patrols. Her touch still carried that same quiet calm, and the wounded men relaxed under her hands as though her presence alone eased their pain. For the first time in years, she worked without the shadow of a throne looming over her, without the fear that her gentleness would be used against her. Months turned into seasons. Elara learned the ways of Shadowveil with quiet determination. She walked the cliffs at dawn, letting the salt air wash away the lingering bitterness of that moonlit night. She sat with the elders around evening fires and listened to stories of the old guardian lines, tales that made the silver mark on her wrist tingle as if remembering. Ronan never pressed her for more than she offered. He joined her on the cliffs sometimes, standing in companionable silence while the waves crashed below. In those moments, she felt the first true threads of healing weave through the wound Darius had left. The pain did not vanish, but it softened. No longer a sharp blade, but a scar that reminded her she had survived. 1 year passed, then 2. Elara's place in the kingdom grew naturally, like roots finding soil after long drought. She began teaching the younger healers how to listen to the body's quiet signals rather than force strength through it. The people started calling her the Quiet Guardian, a name she accepted with a small, private smile. Ronan watched her rise with steady pride, never claiming credit, never demanding anything in return. He treated her as an equal, asking her counsel on matters of the border villages and the old magic that protected the cliffs. In the 3rd year, when a harsh winter brought fever to the outer settlements, Elara rode out with the supply trains and worked beside the healers until the last child recovered. Word of her skill spread through every valley. By the 4th year, the council itself voted unanimously to offer her a permanent seat among them. On the 5th anniversary of the night she had left Silverfang, Ronan stood with her on the wide balcony overlooking the sea. The moon hung full and bright, a reminder that stirred old memories yet no longer broke her. He wore his simple black tunic and cloak instead of full armor, and in his hands he carried a crown unlike any she had seen in the polished courts of the south. It was forged from dark silver and woven with living emerald vines that seemed to pulse with their own soft light. "The people have chosen you, Elara of the First Light," he said, his voice carrying the same calm authority she had first heard in the forest. "Not because of any mate bond or political alliance, but because you have shown them what true strength looks like when it chooses mercy. Tonight we make it official. If you will accept it, I would crown you Queen of Shadowveil beside me, not as a prize or a symbol, but as the partner this kingdom has waited for." Elara looked at the crown and then at the man who had ridden out of the darkness to save her. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from sorrow this time, but from the quiet wonder of being seen so completely. She had come here broken and discarded. Now she stood on cliffs that felt like home, surrounded by a people who valued the very gentleness Darius had called weakness. She nodded once, her voice steady. "I accept, not for power, but for the chance to protect what deserves protecting." The ceremony was simple and solemn, held at dusk on the same balcony with only the council, the elders, and a small gathering of villagers as witnesses. No grand hall filled with nobles, no public spectacle meant to shame or impress. Ronan placed the crown on her head with careful hands, the emerald vines glowing brighter as they settled against her dark hair. The people knelt not in fear, but in genuine respect. Elara felt the silver mark on her wrist flare warmly, as if the land itself welcomed her. For the first time since that terrible night, she allowed herself to feel truly safe. After the short rite, Ronan led her to the ancient library carved deep into the cliff. Shelves of stone held scrolls and bound books older than any in Silverfang. He pulled one particular volume from a locked case and opened it on a heavy table lit by lanterns. "These texts have been guarded here for centuries," he told her. "They speak of a bloodline thought extinct after a betrayal long ago, the first Luna's line. A sealed guardian whose power would awaken only when cast out by false judgment. Your name appears in the margins, Elara, not as a servant or an omega, but as the last heir. The court that rejected you never knew what they sent away." Elara traced the faded ink with trembling fingers. The words described a protective magic tied to her blood, a shield that held back greater shadows. The realization settled over her like a warm cloak, mixing healing with the last lingering pain of the past. She had not been weak. She had been sealed, waiting. A messenger burst into the library then, breathing hard from the long ride. "My king, my queen," he gasped, bowing quickly. "Word from the southern scouts. Silverfang's border shields are failing faster than before. Whole sections have gone dark for hours at a time. The kingdom grows restless. They say the high priestess blames old curses. But the people remember the night the quiet one was cast out." Ronan's eyes met Elara's across the ancient text. The news hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken questions. The kingdom that had thrown her away was beginning to crumble, and the truth she had carried in silence for 5 long years was stirring at last. 5 years had passed since the moonlit rejection in the great hall of Silverfang Keep, yet the kingdom had not forgotten the woman who once moved through its halls like a quiet shadow. Alpha King Darius stood alone on the eastern watchtower, his black and silver cloak whipping in the cold wind that swept down from the border hills. The crystal pillars that formed the ancient shields rose in a long line across the valley below him. Their surfaces once bright with steady silver light, now flickering like dying embers. Sections of the barrier had gone completely dark for hours at a time, leaving gaps wide enough for scouts, or worse, to slip through unnoticed. Darius gripped the stone parapet, his knuckles white as he watched a patrol of warriors ride beneath one of the failing pillars. Their horses shied, and the men glanced upward with uneasy eyes. He had come here at first light after another sleepless night, filled with reports of unrest in the outer villages. Grain stores were lower than they should be after a mild winter. Farmers spoke of strange wilting in the fields, as if the very soil had begun to lose its strength. Mothers kept their children closer to the hearth fires, whispering that the goddess had turned her face away. Darius had dismissed the rumors at first, telling himself they were the fears of simple folk. Yet standing here now with the wind carrying the faint metallic scent of failing magic, he could no longer ignore the truth. Something fundamental had shifted the night he had cast Elara aside. A captain climbed the tower steps, his armor dusty from the long ride. He bowed low, but his face carried the strain of a man who had seen too much. "My king, the easternmost pillar collapsed for nearly half a day yesterday. We lost 2 scouts in the fog. They returned shaken, speaking of shadows moving where no shadows should be. The men are loyal, but they ask questions we cannot answer. Some remember the Omega who once walked these borders with you. They say the shields never faltered while she tended the wounded after raids." Darius turned sharply, his golden eyes narrowing. "Speak plainly, Captain. What are they saying?" The man hesitated, then continued with quiet honesty. "They say the night you rejected her, the moon dimmed for the first time in living memory. The healers in the lower camps still keep small altars in her name. They claim her touch once calmed the land itself. Now the earth feels restless, as if it mourns what was lost." The words struck Darius harder than any blade. He dismissed the captain with a curt nod, but the echo of those words followed him down the tower, stairs and back along the winding road toward the palace. He had told himself for 5 long years that his decision had been necessary for the strength of the realm. He had chosen political alliances and the counsel of the High Priestess over the quiet bond the goddess had placed before him. Elara had never begged, never cried out in the Great Hall. She had simply removed the silver ribbon and walked away with a dignity that now haunted his every quiet moment. In the beginning he had thrown himself into border patrols and council meetings, determined to prove the kingdom was stronger without her. Yet the cracks had appeared almost immediately, and they had only widened with time. That evening he summoned Lady Vespera to the private solar, where maps still covered the long oak table. The priestess arrived in her indigo robes, the crystal staff clicking softly against the stone floor. Her silver hair was braided as tightly as ever, and her smile remained serene. "You wish to speak with me, my king?" The reports from the borders trouble you, I see. The goddess tests those who rule with wisdom. This is merely a passing shadow. Darius did not sit. He stood by the window, staring out at the forest where he had last seen Elara disappear 5 years earlier. The shields weaken with every moon cycle Vespera. Villages grow restless. The people speak her name. In whispers, as though she carried some protection we failed to recognize. I have read the scrolls. Again, the ones you once showed me. There was a footnote, a phrase about a sealed guardian. You dismissed it then. Tell me now, was there more to the prophecy than you revealed? Vespera's fingers tightened on her staff for the briefest moment before she smoothed her expression. Ancient scribes often added their own fears to the sacred texts, my king. The main prophecy remains clear. Strength of fire and iron was required. Elara Voss was gentle, useful in her way, but not the Luna this throne demanded. The shields falter because the rogues grow bolder, not because of any single woman. I have already prepared new rituals to reinforce the barriers. By the next full moon the light will return. Darius turned to face her fully. For the first time in years he allowed the doubt to show in his voice. I stood in this room the night she left, and I felt something shift. The mate bond did not break cleanly. It lingers like a wound that refuses to close. I have taken no other Luna. The nobles press me daily, yet every time I consider their daughters, I see Elara's face as she removed that ribbon. She did not fight me. She simply walked away as if she knew the cost I would pay. The priestess stepped closer, her voice dropping to a soothing murmur. Regret is the shadow that follows every great decision. You protected the kingdom from frailty. The goddess will reward your strength in time. Do not let old ghosts weaken you now when the borders need your focus most. Darius nodded, but the words felt hollow. He dismissed her and remained alone in the solar long after the lamps had burned low. Sleep came in uneasy fragments, and when it did his dreams carried him back to the healing halls, where Elara had once steadied his warriors with nothing but her quiet hands. In the dream she looked at him with those steady hazel eyes, and asked a single question he could never answer. Why did you choose fear over the bond the goddess gave us? The following dawn he rode out again, this time to the deepest edge of the failing shields where the ancient guardian wolves still patrolled the wilds. These beasts were not ordinary pack animals. They were the living remnants of the first protections woven into the land centuries ago, massive silver-furred creatures whose howls once reinforced the crystal pillars. Darius dismounted and walked alone into the mist that clung to the trees. One wolf lay at the base of a darkened pillar, its breathing shallow, and its once bright coat dulled to gray. The creature lifted its great head as Darius approached, its golden eyes clouded with age and pain. The king knelt beside the dying wolf, placing a hand on its broad shoulder. The beast did not growl or pull away. Instead, it looked at him with an intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through the armor of his pride. A low rumble rose in its throat, not a threat, but a final message carried on a breath that grew weaker with every moment. Darius leaned closer, straining to catch the sound. The wolf's voice, when it came, was not spoken in words, but felt in the marrow of his bones, a single name carried on the fading wind. Elara. The guardian's eyes closed for the last time. Its body stilled, and the mist around the pillar thickened, as if the land itself mourned. Darius remained kneeling, his hand still resting on the cooling fur. The name echoed through him like a bell tolling in an empty hall. Elara. The woman he had called weak. The woman he had sent away under moonlight. The woman whose absence now seemed to unravel everything he had fought to protect. A rider approached from the palace road, carrying a sealed scroll marked with the neutral crest of the Inter-Kingdom Council. Darius rose slowly and broke the wax with fingers that felt numb. The message was brief and urgent. A grand summit had been called on neutral ground to address the growing threats along every border. All kings were summoned, including the Rogue King of Shadowveil. Attendance was not a request, but a necessity if war was to be prevented. Darius stared at the parchment, the words blurring slightly before his eyes. He would see Ronan again, the man whose realm had grown stronger, while Silverfang weakened. And somewhere in the shadows of that summit the possibility lingered that he might also see the woman whose name a dying guardian wolf had whispered with its final breath. The neutral ground chosen for the Interkingdom summit lay deep within the ancient Whispering Woods, where no single pack claimed dominion. Tall oaks older than any kingdom formed a natural cathedral, their branches arching high overhead to create a canopy that filtered sunlight into soft golden shafts. At the center stood the Grand Hall, a vast circular structure of white stone and living wood built centuries ago by the first rulers to ensure peace talks could never favor one realm over another. Banners from every kingdom hung along the outer walls, their colors stirring lazily in the breeze. Silverfang's black and silver, Shadowveil's emerald and midnight, others in crimson gold and deep blue. The air carried the scent of pine resin and distant rain mixed with the faint metallic tang of magic that always lingered in this sacred place. Rulers and their entourages arrived throughout the morning, their processions winding along the forest roads like threads drawn to a single knot. Alpha King Darius rode at the head of the Silverfang delegation, his black warhorse stepping with measured pride. He wore the full regalia of his house, the heavy cloak clasped at his throat with a silver wolf's head brooch. Yet beneath the polished armor his shoulders carried a weight that had nothing to do with steel. The failing border shields had worsened in the weeks since the guardian wolf had whispered Elara's name. Villages reported strange mists that swallowed travelers whole. Crops withered overnight in fields that had once been fertile. His own dreams had grown more insistent, showing him glimpses of a silver mark pulsing like a heartbeat across a wrist he had once ignored. He pushed the thoughts down, forcing his face into the stern mask of a king who feared nothing. The high priestess rode beside him in a carriage draped with indigo silk, her crystal staff resting across her lap. She had insisted on accompanying him, claiming the goddess required her presence to bless the talks. Darius had not argued, but the memory of her hidden scroll still lingered like a splinter beneath his skin. As the Silverfang party entered the wide clearing before the Grand Hall, Darius felt the tension crackle like lightning before a storm. Lords and ladies from lesser packs bowed low, but their eyes flicked nervously toward the emerald. Banners already flying high above the eastern wing. Shadowveil had arrived first. Ronan's warriors stood in disciplined ranks, their dark armor etched with runes that seemed to drink the light. They did not posture or boast. They simply waited with the quiet confidence of men who had built strength from the wild places others feared. Darius dismounted and handed his reins to a squire, his gaze sweeping the assembled rulers. He caught brief nods from the Eastern King and the Southern Alpha, but no one approached. The air itself felt heavier, as though the old magic of the woods sensed the fractures spreading across the realms. Inside the antechamber, servants moved swiftly, laying out maps and pouring goblets of spiced wine. Darius accepted a cup, but barely tasted it. Lady Vespera drew close, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Remember why we are here, my king. The rogues grow bolder with every failing shield. You must press for alliances that favor strength. Do not let old regrets cloud your judgment. The goddess has already shown us the path. A new Luna from a proven bloodline will restore what was lost." Her fingers brushed his arm in what appeared to be comfort, but Darius felt only the cool calculation behind her words. He nodded once, yet his thoughts drifted again to the forest road 5 years earlier and the small figure in white who had walked away without looking back. A soft murmur rippled through the servants near the tall arched doors. One young page, a boy from the neutral temple, approached hesitantly, his face pale. "My king, forgive the interruption, but the scouts report something strange. Silver wolves have been seen circling the outer halls. Not ordinary beasts. These are the ancient guardians, larger than any we have known. They appear only when the Queen of Shadowveil walks the paths. They follow her at a distance, never threatening, yet never leaving her side. The moment she steps inside, they vanish into the trees as if waiting for her return." Darius's hand tightened around the goblet until the metal creaked. Silver wolves. The same guardians whose brother had died at his feet, whispering her name. He glanced at Vespera, whose serene expression faltered for the briefest instant before she smoothed it away. "Mere forest creatures drawn to power," she said quickly. "Nothing more. The true guardians answer only to the throne of strength, not to exiles or rumors." Yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease that Darius did not miss. He set the goblet down untouched and moved toward the grand doors, his heart beating harder than it had in any battle. The antechamber opened into the vast circular hall where the summit would begin. Sunlight poured through high windows, catching on the polished stone floor and the long curved table set with seats for every ruler. The other kings and queens had already taken their places, their delegations arrayed behind them. Darius stepped through the doors, his boots ringing softly on the stone. The hall fell into a hushed anticipation as every head turned. He scanned the curved table, searching for the emerald banners of Shadowveil. There at the far end beside Ronan stood a woman whose presence seemed to pull the very light of the room toward her. She wore a crown of dark silver woven with living emerald vines that glowed with their own soft inner fire. Her gown was deep green edged in silver, the fabric flowing like forest mist. Her dark hair was braided with small moonstones that caught the sunlight, and her hazel eyes held the same steady calm he remembered from the night she had removed the ribbon. The silver mark on her left wrist was visible, now no longer hidden beneath silk, but resting openly against her skin where it shimmered faintly as though alive. Elara, Queen of Shadowveil. Darius stopped mid-step, his breath locking in his throat. The mate bond he had tried to sever 5 years earlier surged suddenly within him, sharp and undeniable, like a chain pulled taut across the distance between them. Ronan stood at her side, tall and unyielding, his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair in a gesture of partnership, not possession. The Rogue King's dark eyes met Darius's across the hall with quiet challenge, but it was Elara's gaze that held him frozen. She did not smile. She did not look away. She simply stood there, crowned and radiant, the woman he had called weak now radiating the quiet power that had once calmed his warriors and steadied his kingdom. A low collective murmur swept through the delegations. Servants whispered behind their hands. One of the silver wolves Darius had heard about appeared briefly at the tall window beyond the table, its massive form silhouetted against the trees before it melted back into the forest. The ancient guardians had come, and they answered only to her. Darius felt the weight of every eye in the hall pressed down upon him. The High Priestess's final manipulation had already begun in the antechamber, her words meant to steer him toward new alliances, yet here before the assembled realms the truth he had buried for 5 long years stood crowned and undeniable. The woman he had rejected now stood as queen at the side of his greatest rival, and the very land itself seemed to bend toward her light. The grand hall fell into a stunned silence as every ruler and delegate turned toward the woman who now stood crowned beside the Rogue King. Elara met Darius's gaze across the curved stone table without flinching. Her hazel eyes held the same quiet steadiness he remembered from the moonlit rejection 5 years earlier, yet something deeper had awakened within them. The emerald vines woven through her dark silver crown glowed softly, as though the living metal itself recognized the weight of the moment. Ronan remained at her side, his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair, a silent declaration of partnership that needed no words. The mate bond that Darius had tried to sever surged again, sharp and insistent, pulling at the center of his chest like an invisible tether he could no longer ignore. Before anyone could speak, a low, unnatural rumble shook the ancient oaks outside the tall windows. The sunlight streaming through the high arches dimmed suddenly, as though a cloud had passed overhead, though the sky had been clear only moments before. Servants near the doors whispered in alarm, and one of the lesser alphas rose halfway from his seat, his hand instinctively reaching for the blade at his side. Darius felt the shift in the air, a cold, heavy presence that pressed against the old magic woven into the whispering woods. The high priestess beside him tightened her grip on her crystal staff, her serene mask cracking with the first hint of genuine alarm. Then the shadows came. They poured through the open arches like living smoke, thick and oily black tendrils that twisted across the polished floor. The temperature dropped sharply enough that breath clouded in the air. Delegates cried out as the darkness coiled around the legs of the long table, seeking warmth and life. One of the shadow strands lashed toward a young page who had been refilling goblets. The boy screamed as the darkness wrapped around his ankle and began to pull him into the spreading void. Panic rippled through the hall. Kings and queens pushed back their chairs, weapons drawn in a clatter of steel. Darius surged forward, his own sword clearing its sheath with a ringing sound, but the shadows multiplied faster than any blade could cut. Elara stepped away from her chair, her movements calm and deliberate amid the chaos. The silver mark on her left wrist flared to life, brighter than it had ever been, a pure crescent of moonlight that cast a steady glow across her skin. She did not shout or run. Instead, she lifted her hand palm outward toward the nearest tendril of darkness. The mark pulsed once, and a wave of soft silver light rippled from her fingertips. The shadow recoiled as though burned, hissing like steam on hot stone. The page gasped as the grip on his ankle released, and he scrambled back toward the safety of the walls. More shadows surged forward, drawn now to the light radiating from Elara. They twisted into vague forms, almost human in shape, with hollow eyes that seemed to hunger for the power she carried. The high priestess raised her crystal staff, chanting words in the old temple tongue, but the magic that flowed from it flickered weakly and dissolved against the advancing darkness. Darius fought his way toward Elara, cutting through one shadow form only to watch it reform behind him. His heart hammered, not with fear for himself, but with a raw, desperate realization. This attack was no random curse from the failing borders. It had waited for this summit, for this gathering of every kingdom's strength, and it had come for her. Ronan moved to Elara's side, his blade flashing as he severed a tendril that reached for her shoulder. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steady and protective. Yet Elara shook her head, once her gaze fixed on the heart of the spreading darkness where the shadows seemed thickest. She took another step forward, her crown glowing brighter, the emerald vines unfurling slightly, as if drawing strength from the land itself. The silver mark on her wrist burned now, not with pain, but with purpose. A warmth spread through her chest, expanding outward until it filled the entire hall. Memories flashed behind her eyes, not of the rejection or the lonely forest road, but of the ancient texts Ronan had shown her in Shadowveil's library. The sealed guardian line, the protective power that awakened only in exile. The first Luna's blood that had waited centuries for this exact moment. She whispered a single word that no one else could hear, yet it resonated through the stone floor and the living wood of the hall. Awaken! The silver light from her mark exploded outward in a radiant burst that washed over the shadows like dawn breaking across a frozen plain. The darkness shrieked and recoiled, pulling back toward the arches. But it was too late. From the forest beyond the windows came a sound that silenced every voice in the hall. A deep, resonant howl rose from the trees, not the call of ordinary wolves, but the ancient chorus of the crystal guardian wolves. One by one they emerged from the whispering woods, their massive forms shimmering with the same silver light that now surrounded Elara. Their coats gleamed like moonlight on fresh snow, their eyes bright with intelligence older than any kingdom. There were 12 of them, each as large as a warhorse, and they moved with silent purpose toward the grand hall. The shadows tried to flee, but the wolves bounded forward, their paws striking the stone floor without sound. They circled the hall, driving the darkness into a single shrinking mass at the center of the room. Then as one they turned toward Elara and lowered their great heads in a slow, deliberate kneel. Their muzzles touched the stone before her feet, and the silver light from her mark flowed outward to envelop them. The wolves glowed brighter, their forms becoming almost translucent as the ancient magic recognized its true guardian. The last remnants of shadow dissolved completely with a final hiss, leaving the hall bathed in pure moonlight that had no source in the sky. Elara stood at the center of it, all her breathing steady, her hands loose at her sides. The crown on her head shone like a living star, and the emerald vines had unfurled, fully wrapping gently around her temples, as though the land itself had crowned her anew. She felt the weight of her bloodline settle over her, not as a burden, but as a completion. The power she had carried sealed for so long now flowed freely through her veins, quiet and vast like the sea that bordered Shadowveil. She was no longer the gentle Omega dismissed as weakness. She was the sealed guardian, awakened, the last heir of the first Luna, and the only one who could hold back the greater darkness threatening every realm. Every ruler in the hall stared in stunned silence. Delegates who had once whispered about her frailty now watched with wide eyes. The Eastern King lowered his sword, his face pale with awe. The Southern Alpha dropped to one knee without thinking. Darius remained frozen where he stood, his sword still half raised, his golden eyes locked on the woman he had rejected under that same moon 5 years earlier. The mate bond between them flared visibly, now a thin silver thread of light connecting their hearts for everyone to see. He felt the full force of his mistake crash over him like a breaking wave. The kingdom he had sworn to protect had begun to crumble the moment he had sent her away. And now here in front of every leader of the known world, the woman he had called unworthy stood as the only force capable of saving them all. The crystal guardian wolves rose as one and formed a protective circle around Elara, their heads still bowed in silent allegiance. The light in the hall steadied, and the ancient magic of the Whispering Woods hummed in harmony once more. Elara looked directly at Darius across the distance that suddenly felt both infinite and impossibly small. Her voice, when it came, was soft, yet carried to every corner of the hall with the same quiet dignity she had shown on the night he had cast her aside. You called me weak because you never understood what I carried in silence. The seals have broken. The guardians have chosen. Now the realms must decide whether they will stand with the truth or continue to fall with the lies that blinded them. Darius stood frozen, his sword slipping from his fingers to clatter against the stone floor. Every ruler in the grand hall turned as one toward the woman he had once called unworthy, their eyes filled with shock and the first stirrings of recognition. The awakening was complete, and the destiny she had carried in secret for 5 long years now stood revealed for all to see. The grand hall remained wrapped in silver light as the crystal guardian wolves held their protective circle around Elara. The ancient beasts breathed in perfect rhythm, their massive chests rising and falling like the heartbeat of the land itself. No one spoke. Every ruler, every delegate, every servant stood frozen in place as the truth of what they had just witnessed settled over them like a heavy cloak. The shadows that had nearly swallowed the page and threatened the entire summit were gone, dissolved by the power that now radiated from the woman once called weak. Elara remained at the center, her crown of dark silver and emerald vines glowing steadily, her hazel eyes calm, yet filled with the quiet fire of someone who had carried centuries of secrets and silence. Ronan stepped forward first, breaking the stunned quiet. He reached into the inner fold of his cloak and drew out a thick bundle of parchment sealed with emerald wax. The scrolls were old, their edges worn by time, yet the ink remained sharp and clear. He placed them on the long curved table where every king could see. These records have been guarded in Shadowveil for generations. He said, his voice carrying across the hall without effort. They were never lost, only hidden from those who feared the truth. The prophecy the High Priestess of Silverfang has quoted for years was altered. The original text speaks not of a Luna of fire and iron alone, but of a sealed guardian whose power would awaken only after false judgment. Elara of the First Light carries that bloodline. Her exile was not banishment. It was the key that broke the seal. A scribe from the neutral temple approached at Ronan's nod and began to read aloud from the first scroll. His voice echoed off the stone and livingwood, filling the hall with the weight of forgotten history. The words described the first Luna's line, a protective force tied to the land itself that would hold back greater darkness only when cast out by pride and deception. They named the guardian mark the silver crescent that now shone openly on Elara's wrist. They spoke of an old murder in Silverfang's temple archives where the true heir had been silenced to allow a false line of priestesses to rise. Gasps rippled through the delegations as the scribe continued. The prophecy had never warned against gentleness. It had warned against those who would twist its meaning to keep power. Lady Vespera rose from her seat beside Darius, her crystal staff clutched tightly in both hands. Her face had lost its serene mask, replaced by sharp lines of denial. "These are forgeries," she declared, her voice rising with practiced authority. "Shadowveil seeks to undermine the true throne of strength. The goddess herself guided King Darius's choice 5 years ago. Elara Voss was never more than a gentle servant whose presence weakened the shields. I have served the Moon Temple faithfully. These lies will bring ruin if we listen to them." Yet even as she spoke, one of the crystal guardian wolves lifted its great head and fixed its glowing eyes on the priestess. A low resonant growl rolled from its throat, a sound that vibrated through the floor and made the crystal staff in Vespera's hands tremble. The wolf did not advance, but the message was unmistakable. The guardians recognized deception when they saw it. Delegates who had once nodded at the priestess's counsel now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Eastern King rose slowly, his face grave. "The wolves do not lie," he said. "They answer only to truth. Let the record speak fully." The scribe continued reading, detailing the priestess's own role in the ancient crime. She had not merely twisted the prophecy. She had orchestrated the silencing of the true guardian line to secure her place as advisor to the throne. A faded witness mark at the bottom of the scroll named a long-dead temple servant whose final testimony had been hidden in Shadowveil for safety. The hall grew colder as the implications settled. The failing shields, the restless villages, the dying guardian wolf, all traced back to the night Elara had been cast out. The power that should have protected Silverfang had been sealed away by the very hand that now gripped the crystal staff in desperation. Darius stood motionless at the edge of the circle, his sword still lying forgotten on the stone where it had fallen. The mate bond between him and Elara flared visibly for the first time in 5 years, a thin silver thread of light connecting their hearts, pulsing with raw, honest energy. Every eye in the hall saw it. The thread shimmered with years of unspoken pain, and the deep pull that neither pride nor false prophecy had truly broken. Darius felt it like a living flame in his chest, burning away the last layers of the blindness he had clung to. The court had laughed when he rejected her. The nobles had applauded his strength. Now they watched in silence as the woman he had called unworthy stood as the only salvation the realms possessed. He stepped forward into the open space between the table and the wolves. His broad shoulders carried the full weight of his crown, yet for the first time, he did not stand as the unyielding Alpha King. He stood as a man confronting the cost of his own choice. The hall held its breath as he turned to face the assembled rulers, then looked directly at Elara. His golden eyes no longer hard with pride, but heavy with the regret that had grown in secret for years. "I stand before you all as the one who made the gravest mistake." He said, his voice low at first, then gaining strength as the words he had dreaded for so long finally left him. 5 years ago, in the moonlit hall of Silverfang, I rejected Elara Voss as my fated mate. I called her weak because I listened to counsel that feared gentleness. I chose political strength over the bond the goddess placed before me. I let pride blind me to the guardian power she carried in silence. The shields have failed because I sent away the very heart that held them strong. The kingdom I swore to protect has suffered for my blindness. I cannot undo the pain I caused her that night, but I acknowledge it now before every realm and every witness here. Elara of the First Light was never unworthy. I was the one who failed to see her worth. His words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. No king had ever spoken so openly before the summit. The silver thread of the mate bond brightened between them, pulsing with the truth he had finally named. Elara watched him, her expression steady, yet layered with the quiet dignity that had never left her even on the night he had cast her aside. The High Priestess tried once more to speak her protests, rising in a frantic rush, but the crystal. Guardian wolves closed ranks around Elara, their growls silencing her completely. 2 neutral temple guards moved forward at the scribe's quiet signal and placed restraining hands on Vespera's arms. The exposure was complete. The woman who had manipulated prophecies and hidden murders now stood revealed before the very court she had sought to control. Elara looked directly at Darius across the short distance that felt like an ocean of years. Her voice, when it came, was soft, yet carried the same clear resonance that had once calmed his warriors in the healing halls. The words she spoke were the ones he had dreaded hearing since the moment the ribbon had fallen from her wrist. "You taught the entire court I was nothing. Now the realms see who truly carried the light all along." The hall remained silent as the weight of her statement settled over every soul present. The public reversal was complete. The woman they had underestimated now stood as the one person who mattered most, and the man who had rejected her was forced to face the truth in front of the world. The grand hall remained bathed in the steady silver light of the crystal guardian wolves as the last. Echoes of Elara's words faded into the ancient wood and stone. The assembled rulers sat in silence, their faces reflecting the weight of everything they had witnessed. The altered prophecy lay open on the table, the truth no longer hidden behind temple veils or whispered counsel. Lady Vespera was led away by neutral guards, her protests silenced by the low growls of the wolves that still circled the room in quiet vigilance. Darius stood where he had spoken his confession, his shoulders no longer rigid with the pride that had once defined him. The silver thread of the mate bond between him and Elara continued to shimmer, faintly visible, reminder of what had been broken and what might yet be mended. Elara turned slowly to face the entire hall, her crown of dark silver and emerald vines resting lightly on her brow. The living vines had settled against her skin as though they had always belonged there. She drew a quiet breath and spoke again, her voice carrying the same calm dignity that had carried her through exile and awakening. "I stand before you not as the Omega who was cast aside, but as Queen of Shadowveil and the last. Guardian of the first Luna's line. The power that once protected every realm was sealed away by fear and deception. It has returned now, not to claim thrones or demand revenge, but to offer a choice. We can rebuild together, or we can watch the shadows return stronger than before. Shadowveil chooses alliance. We extend our hand to every kingdom willing to honor the true prophecy and the guardians who have awakened." Ronan nodded beside her, his presence steady and supportive without overshadowing her words. The Eastern King rose first, followed by the Southern Alpha, and then the others. One by one they pledged their commitment to a new council that would include representatives from every realm. The failing shields of Silverfang would be reinforced not by force or political marriages, but by the shared knowledge of the ancient texts and the living magic Elara now commanded. Darius listened without interruption, his golden eyes fixed on her face. When the pledges were complete, he stepped forward once more, his voice low, yet clear for all to hear. "I offer no excuses for the pain I caused you, Elara. I cannot erase the night I stood in my own hall and called you unworthy, but I will prove with every action that I have changed. Silverfang will join this alliance without condition. My borders will open to your healers and your scholars. My throne will support the guardians you command. I ask nothing in return except the chance to earn back the trust one destroyed. The crown I wear feels heavier now, but it is a weight I accept fully." The hall filled with a murmur of approval, not the forced applause of a court, but the genuine respect of leaders who had seen truth prevail. Elara met Darius's gaze across the space between them. The silver thread of the bond pulsed once brighter than before, yet she did not step toward him. She had learned in the cliffs of Shadowveil that her worth did not depend on any man's claim. She had built a life where she was seen and valued for the very gentleness that had once been mocked. Forgiveness was not a debt she owed. It was a gift she would offer only when it came from strength, not obligation. "I accept your pledge for the sake of the realms," she said, her tone measured and kind yet firm. "The bond the goddess gave us remains, but it will not bind me as a possession or a prize. I am queen of Shadowveil by choice, not by fate alone. If our paths cross again in the work of healing these lands, I will judge you by the man you become, not the king you once were. That is the only term I set." Darius bowed his head, a single gesture of acceptance that carried more weight than any public decree. The crystal guardian wolves lifted their heads in unison, their eyes glowing with approval before they turned and padded silently back into the whispering woods. The silver light in the hall softened to a gentle glow, and the summit concluded with agreements sealed under the watchful eyes of the neutral temple scribes. The kingdoms that had arrived divided, now left with the fragile beginnings of unity. Servants and delegates spoke in hushed tones as they departed, the name Elara of the First Light already spreading like quiet dawn across the realms. Days turned into weeks as the new alliance took shape. Riders carried messages between Silverfang and Shadowveil, sharing maps of the failing shields and ancient rituals to restore them. Elara returned to her cliffs overlooking the sea, where the wind carried the salt scent she had come to love. She walked the battlements at dawn, her crown resting comfortably on her brow, and the silver mark on her wrist glowing softly in the morning light. Ronan stood with her on many of those mornings, their conversations turning to the future of both kingdoms. He never pressed her for more than she offered, and in his steady presence she found the peace that had eluded her in the polished halls of her past. Word arrived from Silverfang that Darius had dissolved the old temple council and opened the archives to scholars from every realm. He had personally overseen the restoration of the first guardian pillar, traveling to the border without fanfare to lend his own strength to the rituals. The shields began to brighten again, slowly at first, then with growing steadiness. Villages reported the return of fertile soil and calm nights free from restless mists. The people no longer whispered her name in mourning, but in quiet gratitude. Still, Elara did not rush to Silverfang. She had learned the value of time and the power of choosing her own path. One evening under the same full moon that had once witnessed her rejection, Elara stood alone on the highest balcony of Shadowveil's keep. The sea stretched dark and endless below her, waves whispering against the cliffs. The silver mark on her wrist caught the moonlight and pulsed with a gentle warmth. She felt the mate bond stir faintly across the distance, connecting her to Darius wherever he now stood in his own kingdom. It no longer felt like chains or obligation. It felt like a question waiting for an answer she alone would give when she was ready. She lifted her face to the moon, her voice soft, yet carrying on the night wind. "I was never the curse they feared. I was the light they refused to see. Now I choose where that light falls and who may walk beside it." Far to the south, in the moonlit towers of Silverfang, Darius stood at his own window, the same moon illuminating the restored crystal pillars in the distance. He felt the bond pulse in response to her words, though he could not hear them. He did not send messengers or demands. He simply waited with the patience he had never shown before, knowing that any future they might share would begin only when she decided the time had come. In the quiet hours that followed, the realms breathed easier for the first time in years. The shadows that had threatened to consume them had been driven back by the woman everyone had underestimated. She had risen not through vengeance or force, but through the quiet strength that had always been hers. As the moonlight washed over the cliffs of Shadowveil, Elara stood tall, her crown gleaming and her heart at peace. She was queen of her own terms, the true sovereign Luna, and the one person who had always mattered most. The bond between them remained a silver thread of possibility, stretching across the night. How deep it might grow, and what healing it might yet bring, only time and choice would tell.